So and we call that in Buddhism, we call that unarisen. Right? So it denies cause and effect. It's outside, whatever is permanent is outside of cause and effect. Right? Not saying it can't exist, but if it does exist, it has to be outside of all cause and effect. And if it's outside of all cause and effect, we can't see it, we can't know it. It's like completely outside anything that we could ever experience, anything that would ever matter to us. Make sense? So that's why we say everything has the nature of impermanence. Because anything that doesn't, either you can say it doesn't matter, or you could just say it's not there, right? It's impossible. It's a dilemma that you just can't solve. Okay? So that's impermanence. I'd say it's true. Right? However, we have trouble accepting it. Right? When we look at the world, we have trouble saying everything is impermanent. So, any questions about that? Any discussion that you guys want to have about impermanence? So when it comes down to as a practical matter, and we'll talk a bit more about sort of the practicality of this, if that's true, right, if it's inviolably true, it's true in the past, true in the future, true without exception, true universally, what difference should that make to our daily life? If we treat things as permanent, what should we expect will happen? We're not looking at reality, right? We're living in delusion. And if you live in delusion, you get in trouble, right? If I'm living in a dream world while I'm driving, I'm going to get in trouble, right? I need to pay attention to what's actually going on. So you guys treat things as permanent when they're not? Right? And remember that there's two definitions to impermanence that are in the handout. I haven't talked about them, right? But there's two levels of impermanence that we talk about, right? So one of them is periodic impermanence, right? So things arise and they pass away, arise and cease, arise and cease, arise and cease, right? So what we look at is a phenomenon. It's born, it abides, it dies. So it's gone. But while it's abiding, right, between birth and cessation, it's changing as well. Right, and that's what we call momentary impermanence. Right, so it's always changing. So our definition of something permanent has to be unchanging. So something that is impermanent has to be changing. And it is. And even if it's the universe that's going to last 14 billion years, it's still changing, and because it's changing, it will still cease once those conditions are there. Okay? Okay. I won't try to convince you more than that. You just think about it yourself. The next one, non-self. Now we've got our heads around impermanence. Everything is subject to cause and effect. Everything is impermanent. Now we get to non-self. It just gets worse and worse, doesn't it? Not only doesn't anything last forever, but it's not even really there.
Nothing has any meaning, yay!
So non-self. When we say something doesn't have a self-nature. So another mistake that beginners make, and I made for a long time, was that saying that it has no nature means that it doesn't exist. Right? And that's not true. It does exist. However, it exists in dependence on other things. Right? So it doesn't have its own self-existence. Right? Which means that if you, and the Buddha used the example of a chariot, instead of a chariot, we can think of a car. Right? So everything is dependent, everything is composed of other things. So if you think of a car, right, think of your car in the parking lot. Right? And if you took off all of its parts, right, you took off the wheels, you took out the pistons, you took away the body panels, you took away the leather seats and your central air conditioning and all that kind of stuff. If you took all those things away, what would be left?
No car.
No car. Where's the car? None of those things that I took away was a car, right? But when I I've taken everything away, there's still no car. If the car was there by itself, the car was independent, if the car had a self, then once I took everything else away that wasn't a car, there should be a car left, right? But there's not. Same thing with your house. Take away every part of your house. Right? Once you've taken every part away that isn't a house, there's no house there. But there was before. So everything exists in dependence on all the things that make it up. And again, there's nothing that isn't like this. Right? So that's the concept of non-self. Any questions or discussions about that before we move on? Yeah.
Does it have something beside this thing exists?
Sorry?
Does it have something beside this thing exists?
To satisfy.
Instead of take off everything, this thing doesn't exist.
I understand your question, I'm sorry.
If there's something there, right?
Right.
It might have something beside this object there. With all parts, all the physical body, take away. There must have something beside these things.
There must be something besides that. So in Buddhism, we say there isn't. Right? And think about this too. It doesn't apply just to the physical components, right? We're just talking about form. Right? There's also mental components. There's other things that make it up. Right? So for example, let me show you my favorite possession. Here's my iPhone. Right? So this iPhone is empty, doesn't exist, it has no self-nature. Right? But not only does it have metal and glass and plastic and things like that, it also has, it's a status symbol. Right? People who have iPhones are cool, I think. Right? They're certainly cooler than those BlackBerry people. Right? So it has different attributes. Right? Right? If I have this versus I have a different kind of phone, or if I have no phone at all, that in my mind means it has different attributes. This iPhone has certain characteristics which have nothing to do with the components. Right? Are those real? Are those real characteristics? No, of course not. Right? They're just things that I've assigned. Right? And other people might assign them as well. Right? Let me put that away before someone steals it.
Before it becomes
There's an
permanent.
app.
Yeah.
Exactly, because I'll have it forever until the next model comes out. So when we're talking about real characteristics, what real characteristics are there besides these three? So we try to distinguish what is a real characteristic versus what is just a temporary appearance. Right? Doesn't apply just to iPhones, right? What is the temperature like outside today? Is it hot or cold? Cold, right? Most people say it's cold. If this was the end of a -40 winter and it was this temperature outside, would you think it's hot or cold?
Warm.
Right? Same temperature, same reality. But it doesn't have the nature of being hot or cold. Right? It isn't either. Make sense? Okay. So, the next discussion question that I had here, I was going to break it into groups, but I think it's going to be kind of self-evident, but let's look at it. Any physical or mental phenomenon, can it exist independently of everything else? Can it be comprised of anything? Sorry, can anything be comprised of just itself? I think you guys are probably all on board. Not going to have a big debate about that. I don't think. How about your body? How about your mind? How about your consciousness? You guys remember the teaching on the 5 skandhas? Everyone? Anyone not? Tarek?
No, refresh my memory.
Okay. Can someone refresh Tarek's memory about what the 5 skandhas are? Right?
There's form, feeling, perception, mental formation, and consciousness. That's it. Just those 5.
And what do those 5 comprise? What do they make up?
They make up pretty much what our minds
It's our self, right? What we designate as being a self consists of these 5 characteristics, mental and physical, right? And if we look at those characteristics, what do we find? Do they have their own nature? Are they independent? Right? If we look at our body, where does our body come from?
Four elements.
Sorry, I didn't hear.
Elements.
4 elements, right? So a bit of water, a bit of minerals, things like that, right? Originally, like, you know, whatever matter was present at the beginning of the universe, that makes up part of us. It's also made up of anything that we're eating, anything we're breathing, anything we're drinking. Right? So where does our body stop? If I just walked up onto the street and I say, where does your body stop? What would you say? That's a very good answer. Because if someone came up to the street, on the street and asked me a question like that, I would give them something really like confusing like that as well. But normally we think that our body stops at our skin. Right? We think that our thoughts are just inside our head. Right? That's conventional thinking. Right? That's thinking that there is a self. Right? But in reality, that self extends infinitely. Right? It doesn't just stop at our skin. Right? And even our thoughts, our mind, they don't stop at our brain. Right? They go out into the world. Right? They get translated into actions, and our actions have repercussions. Right? We live in this vast web of cause and effect that connects everything together. Right? And to just say, well, okay, well, I'm just going to border off this part and say this is myself. What does that do? Again, is it reality? Right? And if it's not reality, but we operate with it, does it cause us to suffer? Absolutely. Right? This is the root of why we suffer. It's because we have this illusion that the 5 skandhas are what we really are. Right? That we have a body. Because we could, you know, once we have a body and we think this is mine, this is myself, and I get in all kinds of trouble. Because it gets sick, it gets old. And I say, well, it's my body. But it's not. I just happen to be here right now. It's like if you build a house. Right? So you build a house and you think this is my house. But ants and earwigs or whatever, spiders move in.
Yes.
Right? They live under the floorboards, they don't cause you too much trouble. Sometimes they come out and you have to have a discussion with them. Right? But normally, they move in, and if you like take out your floorboards, you'll see. Right? Or birds will nest, or that kind of thing. You should see, you know, you think my house is bad, you should see my backyard. You know, all the little bugs and things like that just are creepy and gross. They don't live there. This is my backyard. Right? My body, my car, my everything. So as soon as I lose it, as soon as it breaks down, as soon as it gets worse, I suffer. Because I have this delusion that there's me and there's everything else. And there's some kind of barrier between them. And not only that, by putting that barrier, like because we put that barrier up ourselves, all we're doing is we're putting a cage up. It's a cage. It's fetters. Right? In Buddhism we call them fetters. Right? All driven by this idea of self. So, does this have practical application, do you think?
As long as we're ignorant, it does.
Whenever we suffer, right? As long as we're ignorant, we suffer, right? Whenever we suffer, look to this. Am I seeing things as permanent? Am I seeing things as a discrete, independent self? Right? Okay. And then the last seal, nirvana. I always had trouble with this one. Right? And even how many people have trouble with seeing this as a Dharma seal? Because who studied the Dharma seals before? Right? Even other Buddhists have trouble with this one. Right? Has anyone ever seen other traditions, like Mahayana traditions, they actually don't even count nirvana as a Dharma seal? Right? They call it suffering. Right? That's their Dharma seal. Right? So we really have trouble seeing this as a characteristic of things. Why?
It can't really be explained.
Because we live in a dualistic world, so we think in dualistic terms.
So when you say we live in a dualistic world, is that true? How many people agree with Barry?
No, but
Our mind is.
our mind perceives
We think in
dualistic
extremes a
world.
lot.
Well, we categorize.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we're talking about the nature of things being nirvana, right? Can anyone explain what that means?
Non-dualism.
How is this nirvana? Nirvana-like. How is my body nirvana-like? How is my mind nirvana-like? How is the pile of dog crap out in the sidewalk nirvana? It has the characteristic of nirvana. What does that mean?
It's not good or bad.
Let's take like another 5 minutes. I can tell you guys are very confused.
In a nutshell, our mind is so conditioned with our own perceptions, with our own definitions, with our own contentions. Our mind is basically very conditioned.
Okay, talk with your group.
Oh, about ourselves.
Okay.
But this time you guys have to promise to actually pay attention when I call you back.
Okay.
Because remember, I'm in control, I'm in charge. How many people would characterize the discussion they just had as a philosophical one? Hmm? Everyone had a nice philosophical discussion about nirvana? Yeah? Why? Didn't we say from the outset that these are meant to be realities, not meant to be philosophy? Oh, intangible. It's intangible and mental. No, it isn't. It expressly is not. Right? And you were explaining. I will. I will. Before class started, Anne was saying she had a problem with me saying that these are meant to be taken literally, not metaphorically, not figuratively.
Nothing personal, just literal.
I know. I'm not taking it personally. I have a tiny little understanding of the 3 Dharma seals, so I'm not taking it personally. And by the way, I don't understand any of this. I'm just trying, like the rest of you guys. But anyway, it's not philosophical. How can it be a real characteristic of everything around us? Everything you know, everything you've thought, everything you've done, how does it have the characteristic of nirvana in a very real sense, practical? Can anyone answer?
Maybe that you don't have that sensation of not liking things or hating it or being judgmental, like you don't have that kind of emotions.
And what is that? What are those emotions? What do those things lead us to do? To suffer, yes, but what else? Desire is part of it. And before we do any of that, what are we doing? Everything around us, all the time. Judging, conceptualizing, making things have a self, making them have a lasting existence. We're doing this to things all the time. Is that reality? No, right? It's all we're doing is we're looking at temporary appearances. And we're thinking it has a self-nature, right? That it has some kind of ability to not change, right? It's actually stable, is another way of thinking of it, right? That I can rely on it. If something is impermanent, you can't really rely on it. You can't trust that it'll be the same from moment to moment or day to day, right? If you think something has a self-nature, it's all leading to suffering, right? The true nature of everything, everyone could easily see, at least mentally, that everything really isn't impermanent, everything really doesn't have a self-nature. Conceptually, we can understand that. Well, that actually defines it. Things that have the nature of impermanence, things that have the nature of no self-nature, have the nature of nirvana. Right? That's what makes it up. It's just another way of saying it. All these three Dharma seals are exactly the same. They're all saying the same thing. Right? So when we talk about nirvana being reality, that's exactly what it is. It's reality, but we take away all of our conceptualization. We take away all of our thinking. We stop conceptualizing. We stop making it mean something. Right? Because everything that we make it mean is just temporary appearance. And wouldn't it be nice to just let go and stop? Right? So when we talk about nirvana being cessation, if we stop this constant process that we have of seeing, interpreting, conceptualizing, and then grasping, and then trying to acquire, and then trying to cling, right? And then taking all these actions that we take, we can just stop and see things as their true nature. Right? The fact that, you see something and you want it. Well, what is it that you're looking at? You're looking at something that, has no self-nature, doesn't exist from its own side. There's nothing there to grasp at, there's nothing there to want. And the more we can let go, we can see things the way they really are, which is they have the nature of emptiness, they have the nature of nirvana, they have the nature of impermanence. There's nothing to strive for. Right? There's nothing to cling to. We can have peace. Right? A lot of people think of nirvana as a place, or a state, or as a thing with attributes. Is nirvana permanent? Right? Is nirvana have a self-nature? It's the same thing that we talked about before. It's a nonsensical question. Right? It's a characteristic of reality. Oh, but you will. You say you can't talk about it anymore, but you will. Okay. Does that give you just a little taste?
Yes.
Right? And my other question that I wanted to discuss was, why is it so difficult to see that way? Right? But we won't talk about it because we're almost out of time. That can be a lunchtime discussion. Why is it so difficult? If this is reality, we can conceptualize these two, we can't see this one. Okay? The other thing, and guys, we're welcome to stay. If you guys want to stay like an extra 5 or 10 minutes to have another discussion. This is the last question. I think we probably maybe covered some of it. We might have some ideas, but if you'd like to discuss, especially this last question, right? So what are the disadvantages of not recognizing the Dharma seals versus what are the advantages of recognizing the Dharma seals? Right? Because again, we'd spent over an hour talking about this. I let you guys go on your own, and instantly you're back into philosophy. Right? Nothing's going to help you in real life. Right? So rather than make the class completely useless, can we talk about how do we actually move this into our life? What are the advantages of actually seeing this not as metaphorical, not as philosophical, but seeing this as absolute literal truth and having faith in that? Right? And incorporating it into our life the same way that, whatever we know this. Right? It's kind of as easy as reciting your own name. If someone asks you what your name is, you know. If someone asks you what the Dharma seals are, it becomes natural. It becomes part of who you are. And what kind of difference does that make in your life? So, like I say, that's kind of the end of the formal part of the class. We can continue if people want to. If you do, just say it. If not, I'll see you at lunch. And thank you all very much for your attention and letting me be in charge. It's such a nice experience. Thank you very much.